Hi everyone. How's everyone today? I have to be a little honest. It was hard for me to wake up this morning. It's been a while since I woke up early. But yeah, it's good to be here. It's good to see your lovely faces. How I know Pastor Lewis is through my friend Chris, the guy that was up here playing the guitar. And the way that we met was through the hospital. We go out to the hospital on Tuesday nights just to love on people and just show them who they really are, that they're not defined by any sickness or by any judgment that anyone has placed on them, but that they're defined by the love of God, and that just sets them free. And so it's hard to say when there's already been so much said. And I think that, oftentimes we try to use our words to describe how great God is. But I don't know if you've ever realized that, God created not only the world, but he created words. And John 1 says that Jesus is the Word of God. So before we even spoke, God spoke something. And John 1 says it's about Jesus. But the great thing is that when God speaks, he's not only speaking about himself, but he's speaking to something. And when he speaks about something, he's not just using words, but he's using words to explain his thoughts, his meaning. And so I love that, when we say something, there is always a meaning behind what we say. And so when God says something about you, there's always a meaning behind that. And so it's not just words. When someone says, I love you, those are words, but behind that word is a deeper meaning. And so when God says that he loves you, there is the word, but there is something deeper that is amazing about that. We often talk about worship, and we say worship is about seeing the worth in God, and it's true. But same thing, when we're talking about the worth of God, we have to realize that when we're saying something about God, then we're saying that whatever is like God is also worthy. Yeah. And the good news is that you are like him. That you are not just like him, but you are made in his image and likeness. And so when you say that God is worthy, it's only because he first said that you are worthy. Why? Because he spoke over you first. And so I love what James 3 says, because James 3, James is speaking to the brethren, and he says that you cannot say great things about God without saying great things about man, because man is made in the image and likeness of God. So I just want you to turn to your neighbor right now and say something great about them. Use a word, but realize that there is a meaning behind that word. So let's just take a moment right now. Just turn to your neighbor and say something great about them, whatever is on your heart. Yeah, you are lovely. You are beautiful. You are so righteous. There's everything right with you. I'm so glad you are here today. Oh man. When we want to encounter God, we often feel like God is out there. And we try to close our eyes because we try to imagine what God would look like. But Jesus reveals to us that what God looks like is what you look like. You see, because Jesus became flesh. We often try to become more like God, but the gospel reveals that God wanted to become like us. The greatest desire that God has is not that we would change day by day to become more like him. It's that we would realize that he became like us to reveal that we already are like him. And so, we often feel like there are these programs where we perform, and the more we perform these programs, that we become special, we become more likable. And sometimes we live that way, maybe in our jobs, where we're trying to impress people by our performance so that we become somebody, someone famous, someone rich, someone significant. But that's not the way that God works. See, that's not gospel. Because the gospel is not about what we need to do, but the gospel is what has been done for us. You see, everything that we do comes out of what has already been done. So we don't need to seek approval because we've already been approved. We don't need to become lovable. You see, Jesus didn't die for you so that God would love you. It's because God loved you that Jesus died for you. See, we sometimes think that Jesus makes us lovable to God. That sin that was so dark, that was so clouding, it made us so ugly that God could not love us. But that's not the truth. The truth is that God already loved you. And even when you sinned, Romans 5 says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So your sin did not stop God's love for you. I love that it's called abundant grace, because a lot of times the gospel we've heard is a God who sees the abundance of sin, but that's not the gospel. The gospel is the God of abundant grace. No matter how great you think your sin is, the good news is that God's grace is far more abundant. And so once again, we feel like we've got to perform. We've got to become somebody. But the reality is that you already are somebody. You don't need to become somebody because you already are someone. And that someone is worth the life of Jesus. Not even just the death of Jesus, but the life of Jesus. Jesus didn't come just to die, but more importantly, he came to live so that you would live. And so, any words that we say, any words that Pastor Lewis says, any gospel that you hear, I believe it imparts life. So if you're not experiencing life, then I don't believe that's the gospel. If the gospel is feeling like weight, like death, that's not gospel. The gospel sets you free to live life. And so, I think that sometimes when someone up here is speaking, we feel like if I could just listen well, if I could just take notes, if I could just comprehend what they're saying, then maybe I'll become somebody. Maybe I'll understand this gospel more, and then I could get closer to God. And those are well intended. There's nothing wrong about that. But the reality, as I said, is you already are someone. And the gospel is called revelation. And I just want you to think about this for just one moment. Think about the word revelation. The word revelation is similar to the word reveal. The reality is that you can only reveal something that is already true. Because, see, if I told you that there is treasure in the ground and you dig the ground and you find the treasure, it's only because the treasure was already in the ground that you were able to find the treasure. It's the same thing. When we say the gospel is the revelation of God's love, the gospel is the revelation of who you are, it's because you already are that. Amen. See, we might have forgotten who we are, but God has never forgotten. And so Jesus comes to reveal not only what you could be someday, but who you've always been. The God who has always known you. You don't enter into relationship with God when you find out that God exists. No, you've always existed. Your existence proves the existence of God because you've always existed. And so we don't create relationship with God by how far we reach out. No, relationship is what we are born into. Because he has reached out. He has created us in his own image. It says he formed us in his image and likeness, not only from the dust in the ground, but the breath, the spirit out of himself. And so if there's anything that I want to leave you with today, it's not who you can be. It's not what you need to do, but it's who you are. It's what has been done for you. And even if you've forgotten, even if you feel like that burden is too heavy, even if you feel like that sin is so dark, once again, it's not about that. It's about the abundant grace of God. The gospel does not reveal the sin in you. The gospel reveals the Son in you. So today, I just want to encourage you to look to your neighbors, because they are made in the image and likeness of God. Look to yourself and see God and encounter that God. The closest you're ever going to get to God is the person sitting next to you, because Jesus reveals that God not only speaks, but he becomes. And he became flesh. You see, God didn't just say, come somewhere and encounter me. He said, I will go to you in flesh and encounter you. So I encourage you today, just encounter your neighbor. Don't miss out on the opportunity of seeing Jesus in the least of these. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter if they've messed up. It doesn't matter if they might have hurt you in the past. We're called to forgive. We're called to see Jesus in every person, even in our enemies. We're called to see Jesus. Why? Because God loved us, even when we thought we were his enemies, but we were always his friend. We were always his sons. We were always his daughter. And he believed the best about you, even when you believe the worst about yourself. And that's what we believe about one another. And so I just want to encourage you once again, just encounter each other. Don't make it about anything else than experiencing the God in flesh, the God who's so close to you, the God who says that there are not enough words. I'll just leave you with this. Psalm 139, David says that if I were to try to count the ways, if I were to try to count the words that you use, God, to describe me, he said that they would outnumber the grain of sand. You see, God is not running out of words to talk about you. He's not running out of ways to say how wonderful you are. He's not trying to add words to the dictionary because he's getting tired of using the same words. No, there are not enough words to describe your value. There are not enough words to describe how worthy you are to God. So I just want to leave you with that. Try to even count. Stop counting your sins. Realize that God, his words, you cannot even count because they outnumber the grain of sand and by the seashore. There's too many words that we can spend all of eternity just enjoying each and every word that God uses with meaning to describe who we are. So thank you guys for just having me. I just want to be able to meet you guys after and just enjoy just Jesus in every one of you today. So please don't be shy. I'll try to greet you guys, but thank you guys so much for having me here today. Yeah.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, thank you. All right, let me turn my mic on. Good stuff, huh?